check out our streaming schedule for this week. We've got tons of content in terms of the NFL and college football, as we're going live just about every single day this week. So make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single moment where we go live. And now, on with our feature presentation.
This was one of the most insane games of the season. I'm not going to dive into the background of the game, simply because I already did a Dumb Decisions episode on this earlier today. I don't want to repeat myself in the interest of time. So if you haven't seen that yet, click the card in the upper right corner, where I break down how we got to this point in the first place, and what the coach on the opposite sideline did that made this game the insane finish that it was. Because it didn't have to be this way at all. However, this Broncos-Bengals game to decide a playoff spot is now in overtime. And the good news for the Broncos is that a tie works in your favor. They say a tie is like kissing your sister, but not today. Kissing your sister is more than okay on this day. Tie this game, and you're in the playoffs. You're 9-6-1, and the next closest team will be 7-8 with 2 games to go, making it impossible for them to catch you. So if you can get some stops here, and you can tie this game, because the longer the game stays deadlocked, the better your odds of making the playoffs are, you are absolutely golden if you can manage the clock properly. Simply put, you are golden. And you can be golden too by hitting that like button down below, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. We post every single day about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is the place for you. Thanks in advance for your support as we try and hit 70,000 subscribers. At this juncture, the Bengals have the ball, the score still tied at 24. They're near field goal range, which is not good. The good news, though, is that the clock is winding down. So if you can somehow prevent the Bengals from scoring points, there's not going to be a lot of time left, meaning that the Bengals can't get a quality third possession, and meaning that you tie and go into the playoffs. And after the Bengals get a first down on 2nd and 4, they gain at 12 yards to get to the 36-yard line, roughly 4 minutes remain in the contest, which leads to, you're kidding me. You're calling timeouts? But why? You want the clock to stop? You want to keep overtime going longer if you get a stop? You want the clock to run, my friend. You don't want it to stop. You want it to run. Run like the wind. That's really stupid to call timeout there, but okay. As long as you don't do it again.
1st and 10, Khalil Herbert. Blocked by Higgins and twirls down.
Good job, Coach Payton. Good freaking job. You just kept so much time on the clock as a result of that for some inexplicable reason. Meaning that now, if the Bengals don't score and you don't score, the Bengals actually get another quality possession. And I'm sure this won't come back to bite you in the butt whatsoever.
And Burrow with the ball. 1st and goal. End zone. Caught. Higgins. Touchdown. Bengals win.
Yep. Welcome to Dumb Decisions. Before I break down what happened here, this whole series is about taking an in-depth look at decisions made during games that were clearly awful from the start. This isn't something look bad in hindsight. Rather, this is something look awful almost immediately. These are moves where your gut instinct tells you right away that there is no way this can possibly work. And sure enough, your gut instinct was smarter than that of an NFL head coach. And for this one, we're taking a look at the mind of Denver Broncos head coach Sean Payton. Man, what a collapse this would be. What a freaking collapse this would be if it goes to fruition. The Broncos had what felt like a 99% chance of the playoffs with 3 weeks to go. It would have taken a 2008 level collapse to blow this, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And somehow, the Broncos just might. They actually might. And there are a lot of reasons as to why that could be the case, including some rookie mistakes by Bo Nix despite playing great football, the fact that the defense has completely sputtered as of late, following a great first half of the season, with Vance Joseph's defense looking like Swiss cheese, and some inopportune mistakes. But Sean Payton might be reason number one. He's had some questionable coaching decisions this year, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And this might be one of the worst of them all, because the Broncos' odds of doing what they needed to do increased tremendously if Payton just does the smart thing that every other coach would have done in that situation. But because he botched the situation, the Broncos botched the game, even though the Bengals handed it to them on a silver platter quite a few times. So with that being said, let's take a look at why calling timeouts in overtime as the Bengals were trying to run out the clock is a really bad idea. And here's the thing. Usually, I think this is the right move. Because you only get 10 minutes in overtime, and there could be an uneven number of possessions across the period, you want as much time left as possible to possess the football. There were 4 minutes and 15 seconds when the first timeout of 2 was called, and the Bengals were clearly trying to run out the clock for some reason. If you didn't call your timeouts, I think we can assume that instead of 2:49 being left in the contest when Cade York comes on for the overtime field goal, there'd be 2 minutes left. We're assuming everything stays the same, but with that, if you don't call your timeouts, you're getting it back with 1:55 left. And now, you have under 2 minutes to drive down the field and score points yourself. What this also means is that you won't have time to get the ball back at all if you don't do anything on offense. Because if you go 3 and out, even if Cincinnati goes 3 and out, your third possession would be with no time left on the clock, or very few seconds as to render everything moot. So in a normal world, this was smart clock management by Sean Payton. Give me as much time as possible to get the ball back for my team so we can do something with it. However, this was not a normal world. This was not a normal situation. And this was not a normal game. Of course you play to win the game. And you want to win the game. But you know what else works for you? Oh yeah, a tie. A freaking tie. And last time I checked, you're tied right now. If you tie the game, you're in the playoffs. Your number one goal needs to be doing whatever is necessary to clinch a playoff spot. Worry about the rest later. If you can get a win and potentially have a chance to increase your seeding, then do it. But you need to survive first. It's the hierarchy of needs. Getting the win, that's the self-actualization part where you're finding yourself and your motivation and whatnot. Not important to doing the bare minimum of surviving. Getting the tie, that's getting air and shelter. That is necessary to survive. That needs to come first here before anything else. Because if that clock hits triple zeros, and the score is still deadlocked at 24 apiece, you're in the playoffs for the first time since 2015. And guess what happens every time the clock stops? That's right, that's an extra play that can be run in overtime. That is an extra play for the other team to score and win it themselves and break the deadlock. That's an extra opportunity to blow it. It's like in soccer. If a tie is good enough to get you through to the next round of the World Cup, and the game is tied 1-1 in stoppage time, would you rather have there be 3 minutes of added time or 6? Of course you'd rather have there be 3 minutes of added time. It's the smaller number. It's the time that will end the game the quickest. It means there are fewer chances for the other team to take the lead and knock you out. Fewer chances for you to choke it away. But according to Sean Payton, this man right here, who decided to burn timeouts here to stop the clock, that wasn't what he had in mind. The 2 timeouts for the Broncos never should have been called in an overtime period. Period, point blank, end of story. You only burn timeout if your goal is to get overtime done with as quickly as possible and limit the number of chances for the other team is if the play clock is winding down and there is confusion that you might not get the snap off. Or if you're calling it on defense because you got too many men on the field and don't want to get called for a penalty. It should not be used to stop the clock when that doesn't benefit your strategy at all. It goes completely against it. Because here's the difference between calling a timeout and not calling a timeout. The Bengals are lining up for a field goal anyways in sudden death. If they make it, that's the game. And there's nothing you can do about that. Doesn't matter how much time is on the clock. If they miss it, you get the ball back. Call your timeouts, and you get it back with 2:43, like you actually did. Don't call your timeouts, and you get it back with 1:55. That's a full minute difference. That is literally an entire less minute for the Bengals to try and get it back themselves. If you get a first down on the first play from scrimmage with 2:43, that doesn't end the game. If you get a first down on the first play from scrimmage with 1:55, that basically ends it. You're in the playoffs. With 2:43, you are trying to get the first down, and you're trying to throw the ball and whatnot. With 1:55, you don't necessarily have to. The Bengals only have 2 timeouts because you only get 2 timeouts in overtime. I'm not saying you play conservative, but if you run the ball 3 times, you can punt it back to the Bengals with under a minute left and force the Bengals into a 1-minute offense. Not saying it's a guarantee that you win, especially because Joe Burrow is playing lights out. But you've gotten to him a few times today. You force pressure. Get 1 sack, that clock is running with under a minute to go, and this one is just about over. At the very least, you limit the number of plays that the Bengals have available at their disposal to get into field goal range. and you eliminate the possibility that they run the football. But by calling the timeout so quickly, the world is their oyster. They can run. They can take some negative plays and be fine. They still have a de facto timeout available at their disposal in a 2-minute warning. You're giving them more chances and more opportunities to score, and more chances for arguably the best quarterback in football to break down your defense, while at the same time making it less predictable for you because you now have to defend against the run and defend checkdowns over the middle of the field. And what's insane to me is that Sean Payton, as in the man been watching this whole time, decided not to go for 2 at the end of regulation because he knew the situation. He knew that a tie was good enough for them and that a tie equaled the win. Take a listen.
We spent some time thinking about, I'm gonna answer this now. All right, going for 2. We knew a tie, though, was, for us, just as beneficial as a win. And we felt like we had the momentum at that point. So, look, it went back and forth. And in the end, we didn't make enough plays. They did. All right, any questions?
And I completely get that logic. Trust me, I completely get it. I'm not here to criticize Sean Payton for kicking the extra point and forcing overtime and not going for 2. But what I am here to do is criticize Sean Payton for using completely contradictory logic that makes no sense, because that seems to be the theme of this game. So you realize that a tie was as good as a win, which is why you were content to play for a tie at the end of regulation. But in overtime, that logic got thrown out the window? In overtime, a tie was not as good as a win, and you were trying to win the game? Because that's the only logical reason to stop the clock and extend the overtime period when you didn't have to. That's the only way you'd ever do something like that. This is like me not wanting to eat cookies because I'm going on a diet, and then later in the day, I'm at a restaurant, and I yell at the waiter for not having cookies on the menu. Like, at least show some consistency. If you know the situation and you played for it before, why are you not playing for it now when it makes sense to do so now more than ever? It's baffling. You didn't need to call timeouts there, but you did. And it ended up costing your team in a big-time way, and may have just got you eliminated from the playoffs entirely. As for the situation in the game between these two teams behind me right here, I've seen it be compared to what happened 3 years ago when the Las Vegas Raiders played the Los Angeles Chargers in Week 18 of the 2021 season. In that game, it was tied. A tie sends both teams to the playoffs, and the Chargers called the timeout as the Raiders were driving. Thereby, the Raiders got another play, and they were able to kick a field goal and win the game on a walk-off kick in overtime, eliminating the Chargers from the postseason. However, I don't think that's a pretty fair comparison at all. For one, the Raiders were going to kick a field goal regardless. They were going to kick the ball because they wanted the seeding advantage, and there was really no downsides to kicking the football if you're the Raiders at any point, because you don't want to play the Chiefs in the first round of the playoffs, because you did not fare well against the Chiefs in the regular season. So they were going to kick the ball regardless. I get what the Chargers were trying to do there in that regard, trying to get a stop. This is a completely different situation. There was some benefit to the Chargers calling timeout. There was no benefit here to Sean Payton and the Broncos calling timeout. So apples and oranges in this case. So what did we learn from all this? If a tie's as good as a win, then by God, play for the tie, especially if that was your strategy all along. If the game ends in a tie if the clock runs out, then let the clock run out. Do not extend the situation longer than it needs to be if you don't have to. If you have the clinching scenario in the palm of your hands, and all you have to do is just let the clock run down, then don't stop the clock and stall time for no reason. Don't extend the period. Winning isn't always everything if a tie is just as good as a win. If you want to tie the game, then you want there to be as few plays left as possible for a tie to be broken. So to extend the game is really stupid in that regard. And if your strategy and your reasoning for not going for the win in regulation completely contradicts your strategy and your reasoning for going for the win in overtime, then maybe you might want to reevaluate things. And maybe, just maybe, your team isn't as playoff ready as we all thought you were just a couple of weeks ago. Because when all these elements are in play, you can't exactly be surprised when this play backfires. Talk about a dumb decision.
Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.